Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hey everybody, my name is Jake. I'm coming at you from Press B to Cancel. We're a weekly podcast that talks about, wait for it, video games. That's right, Press B to Cancel. We're a video game podcast too. And look, listen, I've been podcasting for about 5 years now, and I've got a great group of guys on my show. And for the most part, they humor my taste in video games. But there are some games that they won't even try, that they refuse to give the time of day. Maybe they're right, and maybe they're wrong. Pretty sure they're wrong, because what I got this week is a game that is, I think, one of the best of its IP on home consoles. So let's take a trip into that nostalgia hole, back to the 80s. So if you're like me, and you grew up in the 80s with a Nintendo, you got what? 1, maybe 2 games a year, tops? You know, carts were pretty expensive. So here I am, 87, at a local mall with my aunt or something, and I got a fistful of birthday money. And this is my chance to get a new game, and it's got to be good. It has to be one that I'm going to play more than once, a game that I can't beat in a weekend. This needs to have some replay value. It has to be good. And I know people are going to say, never judge a book by its cover. But when you're 8 years old and you only get one game a year, maybe this time you're going to judge it by its cover. So here I'm walking down the shelf looking at various carts, and I come across one box that's blue, and it has a statuesque comic book figure in all his 1950s glory. And that's Superman. And if you're like me in the 80s, as a young kid, you're thinking, how could I go wrong with Superman? Everybody loves Superman. They wouldn't license and make a bad Superman game. That's just unheard of. Nobody does that. Right? This game might be trash, you're thinking. But what if it's not? What if this is one of the best Superman games ever made? Ignoring the arcade game. The arcade game is a classic. I'm talking about home console releases of Superman. This game came out in 1987 on the NES, and I'm going to say it's a Kemco classic. And you're probably thinking, Jake, I've never heard the words Kemco and classic in the same sentence before. That's a new one. And it may be so, but I'm going to tell you, this game, you have to give a shot. You have to. You have to. Starting with the title screen. You boot the game up, and you get a little theme song. And you're thinking to yourself, that doesn't sound quite like Superman, but it sounds okay. And then it goes to the intro, where Superman gets his mission from the Statue of Liberty. She says General Zod has returned and is wreaking havoc, and it's up to you, Superman, to save the world. And now you're probably thinking, did he just say the Statue of Liberty talks? Yes, I did. The giant Statue of Liberty waifu gives you your mission, talking down to what is, I would call it a chibi Superman, but he's not that cute. But he's definitely the proportions. He's a 4-foot tall munchkin with a gigantic cranium, talking to what appears to be a 40-foot Statue of Liberty. You know, the sense of scale is off in this game, and you're going to hear me say that later on too. The sense of scale is a bit weird, but that's okay. It's okay. Sure, Chibi Superman does not match the cover artwork, but the game is still possibly good, right? Anyway, you start the game and you are Clark Kent, literally a little green suit wearing Clark Kent with the glasses at the Daily Planet. And there's, NPCs in the lobby that you can talk to. Lois Lane is there. His boss is there. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to tell you right now, this is a pro tip from me to you. Whatever the NPCs tell you in the opening screen, you have to screenshot it. You have to write it down. You have to take notes. Because I'm telling you, whatever they tell you, they do not repeat it. And in some missions, it's pretty critical what you need to do for that stage. And of which there's 5 stages. Each one kind of ends in a classic Superman boss or villain. Actually, I'm going to take that back. I don't know how classic or iconic some of these are. General Zod obviously has a history with Superman, but one of the bosses is this giant computer. So I don't know. And no, not Brainiac. It's literally a giant computer. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. One of the missions actually has you hunting down flames, living flames. And they don't really tell you where to find them on this very large, vast, open map, right? Unless you listen to the NPCs on the first screen, and then you kind of know where to go. And that's the thing with this game. The map is actually quite large. I mean, it's a 2D platformer, yes. But there's multiple tiers of streets of Metropolis that you can navigate and explore. It's really well done. It's actually quite interesting. Can you go into every building? No, but there's definitely a lot of the buildings you can kind of go into, and there's secret enemies and spawns all over the place. How do you navigate the map? You get 2 ways. You're a Superman, so obviously you can fly. Leap tall buildings, single bound, all that crap. The other one, you can take the subway. Yes, there are parts of the map that are subway accessible, and you can take the subway to move between streets. One catch, though, you need to first unlock the subway pass. I'm not kidding. I mean, it makes sense for Clark Kent. You know, you're roaming the map as Clark Kent. You need a subway pass. I get it. But there's something about Superman, the Man of Steel himself, riding a subway car, but can't do it until he gets a pass. I don't know, that's kind of hysterical to me. Either way, the main gameplay loop here is you start each mission as Clark Kent. You exit the Daily Planet. You got to find the nearest telephone booth, I guess it is. You wouldn't know it looking at the graphics of this game, because the telephone booth is like 15 feet tall. It's massive. You got a little tiny chibi Clark Kent, and the phone booth is easily 4 times his height. But you enter the telephone booth and you turn into Superman, and you get a little ditty. And then as Superman, you can explore the map to try and find NPCs, give you clues of where to go on this vast map to find the bad guys, of which there's good assortment of them. You know, you have your notable Superman villains, like guy who shoots guns with bullets the size of fists, or mad bald guy in a green jumpsuit, or ghosts. You know, Superman fights ghosts in the movies, right? Or the living cat thing with an oxygen tank who flies through the air. All very well-known, established Superman enemies. Look, I know I'm dumping on the game a bit, and you're thinking, Jake, this game sounds bad. But what if I tell you, you hit start, and you get a screen full of Superman's iconic powers. You got heat vision. You got super spin, so you can drill through the ground. You got super flight. You got Super Breath 1 and Super Breath 2. You know, canonical powers from the comic books. Superman's Breath 1 and Breath 2. One freezes and one, I think, knocks out. But heat vision's a blast to use. And sure, the super spin, it only works in very specific spots, very specific areas of the map where the ground is a different color, indicating that's soft enough for the Man of Steel to drill his butt through. But that's fine. The fact that it's there is neat. It also has X-ray vision, and this part was always funny to me as a kid. In the gameplay, if you suspect there's hidden enemies in a room, of which there are a few, mostly ghosts, you can use the X-ray vision ability, and it makes them appear. Now, you're probably thinking, if you're a comic book fan, can't Superman, use X-ray vision to just see through everything? Well, apparently not. Apparently, from what I read in the manual, Lex Luthor, up to his old tricks, has lined every building in Metropolis with lead. So Superman can't see through objects. But he can definitely, rest assured, see ghosts that may be invisible. I mean, it's a gameplay hook, but whatever. Either way, the fact that you have a menu screen full of Superman's, I think, iconic powers is just really a blast to use. They're fun. Each one has a number of times you can use it, but you can fairly easily refill the meter by killing out enemies, and they will occasionally drop, things to restore the power. But what I really liked in this game, hidden across the map, in certain buildings, certain mob groups, on certain rooftops, there's at least one permanent bar upgrade for each of Superman's powers. So you can find the one for heat vision, for example, and use it that many more times in a stage, and it carries over from stage to stage. If you look on the stat screen, there's also a defense and attack stats. I'm not going to call it a JRPG, but the fact that the Superman game has stats and multiple powers, I think is pretty cool. What's interesting about this system, though, too, is you have to play this game, but you also have to play it with the Famicom version to compare the two. In the Japanese version, first off, the music is better. They actually digitized bits of the score from the Superman films. I guess they had rights issues when it came to the NES version. But the Japanese version has a little bit of Superman music. But at the start of that game, you actually enter the name of your character and your blood type, because, in Japan, blood type is a huge cultural thing. But depending on the blood type you put into the game, it affects how much of each of the superpowers you have, your bars, and what your attack and defense stat is to start off. It's just wild. It's kind of like Japan has Spider-Man, but it had Spider-Man on a motorcycle just because. It feels like that. It's a different take on Superman. It's very weird. But they don't have that in the NES version. But anyway, you have lots of powers. They're fun to use. Even if they're not, completely comic book accurate, they are fun to use. They're great in combat. Heat Vision's a blast to just fry enemies, which is good because combat in this game is a little bit clunky. And I'm going to say it again, the sense of scale is weird, right? 40-foot Statue of Liberty, phone booths are 15 feet tall. Chibi little Superman. But when you hit up to jump, yes, this is an up to jump game. You go flying into the air on the screen. Like you jump 20 feet in the air. And you think, well, that makes sense. You're Superman. Of course you can jump 20 feet on a screen. The problem is, so can every single entity in the game. Every single enemy that spawns. Whether it's a ghost or, ogre or just that random gangster that shoots bullets that, I'm not kidding, are the size of your fist. They can all do this crazy 20-foot jump in the air. And Superman as well, when you're in the air, if you spam the punch button, you kind of just flail around in the middle of the air and don't land. It messes the physics up. But it sounds dumb, and maybe it is, but it's still fun. I still liked jumping up toward a boss, and you're just flailing on the punch button next to them, getting in a bunch of cheesy hits to take them down. And of course, when they die, the sprite turns upside down and slowly falls off the screen because budgets, and there wasn't much in the way of special effects in this game. Combat is still fun, even if it is weird. It's got a neat hook with it, though. If you take too much damage, because, Superman takes damage from giant bullets and ghosts, apparently. If you take enough damage, you turn back into Clark Kent. And, of course, Clark Kent is still able to jump across the screen in great strides, but his damage is nerfed pretty badly. How do you get back? You have to build your meter back up again. As you kill certain enemies, they do drop kryptonite. And you're thinking, I know comics. Kryptonite damages Superman. Well, sure, yes, the green kryptonite and the red kryptonite will damage Superman more. But occasionally, the kryptonite that falls out of the enemies is blue. And blue kryptonite, I guess, gives you health back. Again, I don't know the comics well enough to say if that's true or not. But God help you if you're colorblind as you try and figure out which of the 3 kryptonite drops from enemies will hurt you more or actually recover your life. It's funny. But otherwise, yeah, this is a game that I know people who have played it. This is one of my favorite games to get other people to play, just to see their reaction to it. Just from the opening sequence of Superman and the way his sprite is so chibi, to see if they bounce off the gameplay. Because the initial gameplay is a bit jank. I'm not gonna lie, but if you give it a shot and you just really embrace what the game is giving to you as its loop, starting a mission. Get your briefing, go to the map. You're exploring, again, quite a large amount of map. I mean, there's fast travel, but without the fast travel, if you were to walk end to end, it's a good 25-minute walk. Like there's a lot of map here. Various buildings to go and explore and find, lots of secrets. You have all the powers. I mean, I look at other Superman games on console. Obviously, everybody's going to look at Superman for the N64 and how trash that is. That's a trope at this point. But when I look at that game and what they did with Superman's power set, and I look at the NES game, I think Kemco nailed it. I wish the graphics were a little bit better, maybe a little bit more serious. I wish the physics were not quite so janky. But the core gameplay loop is a lot of fun. I love the exploring and finding the enemies, taking on the bosses, and every time you kill a boss, you get a short cut scene where the newspaper flashes on the screen. Superman takes down, I think it was the Dragon Gang, or Superman takes down the evil supercomputer. And you get the music that plays along with it. It's a pretty satisfying experience and not very long. You could probably clear this game in, hell, probably less time than it took me to talk about it on this podcast. But anyway, that's Superman for the NES. Maybe it's the rose-tinted glasses. Maybe it's the fact that as a kid, I had very limited access to Nintendo games. I got that one game a year. Maybe I'm trying to justify to my psyche that this game was actually good and not trash. But I think you give it a shot. It's 2024 in today's age of emulation. It's so easy to play games. It's worth trying this one out. And you'll probably agree with me. It certainly beats Superman 64. Anyway, my name is Jake. Again, I'm from Press B to Cancel. You can find our podcast over on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts, or just check us out over at pressb.org. It's been a blast. Thanks for having me on. Talked about one of my favorite games growing up. And as always, happy gaming.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.